What if the true rulers of the ancient world have been erased from history? In this video, we uncover the hidden history of powerful black gods, deities, and divine figures whose influence shaped civilizations long before modern religions took hold. From the mighty Nubian pantheon to the spiritual legacies buried beneath sand and silence, this is the story they didn't want you to know. Forgotten by design, remembered by truth seekers. Stay tuned as we reveal suppressed knowledge, challenge historical lies, and reclaim the legacy of black divinity that once ruled the earth. Prepare to see history like never before. The hidden history of powerful black gods. Unearthing the forgotten divinities of ancient Africa and beyond. For centuries, mainstream history has been crafted by the victors, often omitting, distorting, or completely erasing the contributions and divinities of black civilizations. At the heart of these forgotten legacies lie powerful black gods, spiritual beings, deities, and divine kings whose influence shaped the earliest foundations of religion, governance, and cosmology. These gods were once worshipped, feared, and revered across ancient Africa, the Near East, and even parts of Asia. But through colonization, conquest, and the rise of Abrahamic religions, their names were demonized, their temples destroyed, and their stories buried. This is the hidden history they never taught us, the divine black legacy that lives in the shadows, waiting to be reclaimed. 1. Ancient Kemet and the Divine Pantheon. One cannot speak of powerful black gods without beginning with Kemet, ancient Egypt. While Egypt is often culturally appropriated or whitewashed, the truth is that its early rulers, priests, and deities were of African origin, rooted deeply in Nile Valley civilizations. Ra, the sun god, was the supreme force of creation, symbolizing divine order and light. Osiris, god of the afterlife, represented resurrection and justice. Aset Isis was a goddess of magic and motherhood, and Heru, Horus, symbolized divine kingship and protection. Together, they formed a theology that blended natural elements with human experience, life, death, rebirth, and the cosmic struggle between order and chaos. These gods were depicted with rich brown and black skin in early temple art. Their temples, rituals, and priesthoods were overseen by black African nobility and scholars. This system predated Greek and Roman pantheons, influencing later religious thought from Judaism to Christianity. Yet, modern depictions rarely acknowledge their true African roots. 2. Nubia and the Kingdom of Kush. Divine kings as living gods. South of Egypt lay Nubia, home to the Kingdom of Kush, a civilization just as grand, yet even more forgotten. The Kushite kings were not only political rulers, they were seen as living gods on earth. Black pharaohs like Pianki, Shabaka, and Taharka ruled both Nubia and Egypt, spreading a deeply spiritual form of governance that fused kingship with divinity. In Nubian tradition, gods such as Apidmak, the lion-headed war god, and Ammonius, a creator deity later adopted by the Egyptians, stood as symbols of strength, wisdom, and cosmic order. Nubian temples in places like Jebel Barkal rivaled those of Thebes and Memphis, yet their story is almost completely absent from most world history books. Why? Because these rulers and their gods represented something dangerous to colonial powers, a vision of black spiritual and political power that predated Europe's influence by thousands of years. 3. Ethiopia's divine lineage and the Kebra. In East Africa, Ethiopia holds a unique place in divine black history. According to the Kebra, the legendary queen of Sheba, Makeda, bore a child with King Solomon, giving birth to Menelik I, founder of the Solomonic dynasty. Ethiopian emperors claimed direct descent from this divine union, viewing themselves as both kings and priests, guardians of a sacred covenant with God. But even before Judeo-Christian influence, Ethiopia had its own indigenous gods and spiritual systems. Deities tied to the land, the stars, and ancestral spirits were honored long before Christianity took root. When Christianity did arrive, it took a uniquely Ethiopian form, incorporating ancient symbols, languages like Guizi, and spiritual philosophies that resisted Roman and European domination. Ethiopia remains one of the few African nations never colonized, and its legacy of black divinity remains intact, though rarely acknowledged in global religious narratives. For West African Orishas and the pantheon of Ifa. Far from the Nile, the Yoruba of West Africa developed one of the most sophisticated spiritual systems in the world. The Ifa tradition, centered around powerful divine beings known as Orishas. These are not mere spirits, they are gods of nature, emotion, and cosmic energy. Obatala, the father of humankind, represents purity and wisdom. Shango, the god of thunder and fire, is a symbol of power, masculinity, and leadership. Ashen, goddess of love and rivers, governs beauty, fertility, and diplomacy. Eshu, the trickster and messenger god, controls the crossroads between divine and human realms. These gods have survived slavery, colonization, and forced conversion. Through the transatlantic slave trade, they traveled to the Americas, re-emerging as Santeria, Candomblé, and Vodou, often demonized by colonial Christianity as witchcraft or devil worship. Yet, the resilience of the Orishas proves that the divine essence of black spirituality cannot be erased. It simply transforms and endures. 5. India and the Black Gods of the East. Surprisingly, black divinity appears even beyond Africa. In ancient India, many early depictions of gods show them with dark or blue-black skin. The god Krishna, whose name means the Dark One, and Shiva, often depicted with matted hair and ash-dark skin, show physical features linked to Dravidian and possibly African heritage. The Tamil Siddhas, ancient spiritual mystics, are often described with dark skin, woolly hair, and African-like features. Some scholars argue there were ancient migrations between Africa and southern India, influencing religion, language, and cosmology. This connection between African and Eastern spirituality is rarely explored, but it hints at a much older and interconnected sacred past, where black gods and sages were global in reach and influence. 6. Colonial erasure and the demonization of black divinity. So why were these powerful black gods forgotten or demonized? The answer lies in the rise of colonialism, white supremacy, and religious conquest. As European powers invaded Africa, Asia, and the Americas, they brought with them missionaries, soldiers, and scholars determined to replace indigenous belief systems with Christianity or Islam. Temples were destroyed. Sacred sites were desecrated. Oral histories were erased. Deities were renamed as devils or pagan idols. Black gods, symbols of empowerment and resistance, were rebranded as demons or primitive beliefs. The theological narrative was clear. White was holy, black was heathen. This systematic campaign not only erased gods from memory, but conditioned generations to reject their own divine ancestry. 7. The Reawakening, reclaiming black divinity today. But history cannot be buried forever. Across the world, people are awakening to the reality that the divine is not colorless, and that blackness has always been sacred. Afrocentric spiritual movements are reclaiming the wisdom of Kemet, the strength of the Orishas, and the royalty of Nubia. Scholars and activists are digging into ancient texts, retranslating myths, and confronting colonial lies. Artists and musicians are invoking ancient gods in modern forms. From hip-hop to fashion, the divine power of black identity is resurging. We are witnessing a global spiritual renaissance, a return to the source. Why this history matters. The hidden history of powerful black gods and its impact on identity, truth, and liberation. The story of powerful black gods is far more than a collection of ancient myths, legends, or religious tales. It is a foundational pillar that holds the keys to understanding who we are, where we come from, and what we can become. The hidden history of black divinity has been systematically obscured for centuries, but recovering it is one of the most important acts of restoration and reclamation that can happen for individuals and entire communities today. This history matters profoundly because it addresses three essential elements of human experience: identity, truth, and liberation. To fully grasp why, we need to explore each of these pillars deeply and see how the rediscovery of black gods reshapes them. Identity, reclaiming the divine self. Identity is not just about race or ethnicity. It's about understanding one's place in the cosmos, society, and history. When entire peoples have their histories erased or rewritten to exclude their contributions, their sense of self becomes fractured. This is exactly what happened to African and black diasporic peoples through centuries of colonialism, slavery, and cultural oppression. The dominant narratives in history and religion often portray black people as primitive, inferior, or without spiritual depth. The idea that black ancestors were kings, queens, or gods was dismissed as fantasy or folklore. This imposed a damaging identity of victimhood and subjugation. Knowing that your ancestors worshipped powerful gods and saw themselves as divine beings is a radical form of empowerment. It transforms the internal narrative from one of lack and inferiority to one of greatness, sacredness, and resilience. Sacred ancestry. When we realize that our forebears did not view themselves as powerless, but as descendants of gods, we begin to understand that divinity is inherent, not something imposed from outside. Our skin color, culture, and history become sources of pride, not shame. Spiritual continuity. Many black people in the diaspora feel spiritually disconnected because forced conversion disrupted their traditional beliefs. Rediscovering black gods like those from Kemet, Nubia, or Yoruba traditions restores a spiritual lineage that reconnects the past to the present. Cultural affirmation. The hidden history affirms African civilizations as complex, advanced, and deeply spiritual. This counters stereotypes and cultural erasure, allowing black identity to be celebrated on its own terms rather than through the distorted lens of colonial narratives. In short, reclaiming this history is reclaiming the self. It is healing the wounds inflicted by centuries of denial and disempowerment. It affirms that black people are not accidental or marginal actors in history, but central and sacred participants in the unfolding story of humanity. Truth. Unveiling the suppressed reality. The next reason this history matters is because it is about truth, the pursuit of an accurate, unfiltered understanding of our collective past. History is often told by those in power, and what gets left out or altered reveals who benefits from the dominant narrative. Colonial and religious erasure. The powerful black gods of Africa and other regions were deliberately erased or demonized to justify colonization and slavery. European conquerors used religion as a tool of oppression, labeling African deities as pagan or devil worship to dehumanize black people and undermine their cultural systems. Academic bias. For centuries, Western historians and archaeologists excluded or minimized African contributions to global civilization. The achievements of Nubia, Kush, Aksum, and Kemet were often attributed to outsiders or dismissed as minor. This scholarly bias perpetuated myths of African inferiority. Cultural appropriation. Many elements of black spirituality were appropriated by other cultures without acknowledgement. For example, Greek gods borrowed heavily from Egyptian mythology. The original African context was obscured, and the god's blackness was erased. Revealing this hidden history is an act of restoring truth to a deliberately distorted story. It challenges falsehoods and forces the world to confront uncomfortable realities. Black people have always been creators, thinkers, and spiritual innovators. African civilizations were the origin of many philosophical and religious concepts later adopted worldwide. The narrative of African primitiveness is a constructed lie designed to justify exploitation. This truth empowers Black people to reclaim their history and rewrite the story with honesty and pride. It also broadens the global understanding of human civilization, promoting a more inclusive and accurate worldview. Liberation, the power to transform and empower. Perhaps most profoundly, this history matters because it is about liberation, not just physical freedom, but mental, spiritual, and cultural liberation. Mental liberation. The belief systems and narratives imposed by colonial powers created a mental slavery that persists today. Negative stereotypes, internalized racism, and cultural alienation keep many Black individuals trapped in limiting beliefs about themselves. Rediscovering the powerful Black gods and spiritual heritage disrupts this mental bondage by offering new frameworks for identity and purpose. Spiritual liberation. Forced conversions and missionary campaigns severed Black people's connection to their indigenous spiritualities. This disconnection left a void that was often filled with alien beliefs that did not fully resonate with African worldviews. Reclaiming Black divinity restores spiritual autonomy and reconnects people with sacred traditions that honor their ancestors and environment. Cultural liberation. The destruction of African religions and cultures was part of a broader agenda to control and exploit Black people. By reclaiming traditional gods and practices, communities restore their cultural sovereignty and resist ongoing forms of cultural imperialism. This creates space for healing, resilience, and creative expression rooted in authentic heritage. Political liberation. The hidden history of divine kings and god kings reminds us that Black peoples once ruled powerful, sophisticated empires. This legacy challenges narratives of permanent subjugation and opens possibilities for political empowerment and self-determination today. Liberation through history is a process of transformation, both individual and collective. It dismantles falsehoods, heals trauma, and empowers Black people to define their destinies based on their true heritage. The interconnectedness of identity, truth, and liberation. These three pillars, identity, truth, and liberation, are deeply interconnected. One cannot be fully realized without the others. Without identity, there is no grounding for truth or liberation. A fragmented or false identity leaves people vulnerable to manipulation and disempowerment. Without truth, identity is based on illusions or lies, and liberation becomes superficial or impossible. Without liberation, identity and truth remain abstract ideals without practical application in everyday life. By uncovering the hidden history of powerful Black gods, we are nurturing all three simultaneously. We rebuild identity on a foundation of sacred ancestry and cultural pride. We reveal truth by correcting distorted historical narratives. We inspire liberation by opening pathways to mental, spiritual, and cultural freedom. Together, these elements help repair the broken link between past, present, and future. The global impact beyond Black communities. While this history is especially vital for Black people seeking to reclaim their roots, its impact extends globally. It challenges Eurocentric histories that dominate education and media. It fosters cross-cultural respect by highlighting Africa's role as the cradle of civilization and spirituality. It encourages a more holistic understanding of humanity's shared origins and spiritual diversity. It confronts systemic racism and cultural imperialism by asserting Black excellence and sacredness. Ultimately, embracing this history benefits everyone by expanding the scope of knowledge and promoting equity in historical representation. Modern movements and the resurgence of Black spirituality. In recent decades, there has been a resurgence of interest in African spiritualities, ancient Black gods, and indigenous knowledge systems. Movements like Afrocentrism emphasize African contributions to world history and culture. Spiritual groups worldwide are reviving practices honoring Orishas, Kemetic gods, and Nubian deities. Artists, writers, and filmmakers bring Black gods into popular culture, reshaping how divinity and race intersect. Academic research continues to uncover new evidence of ancient African civilizations' sophistication and influence. This revival is not a nostalgia trip, but a dynamic reclamation of power that inspires new generations to connect with their sacred heritage while navigating the modern world. Healing historical trauma through divine recognition. The erasure of Black gods and histories is not just an intellectual issue. It has caused profound psychological and spiritual trauma. Collective trauma arises when whole peoples are denied their history and dignity. Cultural amnesia creates disconnection from ancestors and traditions that once provided meaning and guidance. Internalized racism results when dominant narratives label Blackness as inferior or evil. Recognizing and honoring powerful Black gods offers a path to healing. It restores pride and self-love by affirming ancestral greatness. It reconnects people to rituals and spiritual practices that foster well-being and community. It challenges negative stereotypes that harm self-esteem and mental health. Healing through history is a radical act of self-care and resistance, inspiring future generations. Finally, this history matters because it inspires hope and vision for the future. Children who learn about powerful Black gods see themselves as inheritors of divine legacies, not victims of history. Communities build stronger foundations by embracing cultural wisdom and spiritual resilience. Activists and leaders draw strength from ancient models of justice, leadership, and cosmic balance. In reclaiming Black divinity, we also reclaim the ability to dream boldly, create freely, and lead courageously. The hidden history of powerful Black gods is far more than myth or religion. It is a beacon of identity, a wellspring of truth, and a gateway to liberation. It transforms how Black people see themselves and their place in the world. It challenges distorted narratives imposed by centuries of oppression. It heals wounds inflicted by erasure and dehumanization. To know that your ancestors did not see themselves as slaves or lesser beings, but as kings, queens, and gods, is a revelation that changes everything. It is a radical act of empowerment, a reclaiming of sacred heritage, and a call to awaken the divine within. This history matters because through it we reconnect to our past, reclaim our present, and reimagine our future. It is a path to freedom, mental, spiritual, cultural, and political. It is a journey toward wholeness and truth. And in that journey, we discover that Black divinity never truly disappeared. It was waiting for us all along, in the stones, the stars, and the stories of our ancestors. Now it is time to remember, honor, and embody that powerful legacy. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the hidden history of powerful Black gods. The truth has been buried for too long, but now the veil is lifting. These divine beings shaped culture, law, and belief systems across the ancient world, and their stories deserve to be remembered and honored. If this video inspired you to question mainstream history and dig deeper, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What truths do you believe are still hidden? Until next time, keep seeking, keep questioning, and never stop uncovering the power of your forgotten legacy.